The rain fell steadily over Charleston's cobblestone streets, casting a reflective sheen under the warm glow of the gas lamps lining the historic district. Cody Miller pulled his coat tighter against the chill as he navigated through the crowded sidewalks, weaving between tourists and locals hurrying to escape the weather. His leather shoes tapped sharply against the stone, each step a reminder of the long day behind him. Meetings had consumed his energy, and all he wanted was the comfort of his quiet home. Distracted, Cody reached for his wallet to pay a street vendor selling freshly roasted pans, but found his pocket empty. His brows furrowed as he checked again. His other hand instinctively gripped the strap of his briefcase. Panic bubbled up as he realized the wallet wasn't there. He spun around, retracing his steps in his mind. The cafe, he muttered under his breath, recalling his last stop. Had it fallen when he reached for his phone? As he turned to head back, a voice called out, "Excuse me, sir." Cody froze, his gaze darting toward the source of the voice. A woman, drenched from the rain, was hurrying toward him. Her clothes clung to her thin frame, and her hair hung limply around her face. In her outstretched hand, she held a familiar black leather wallet. "Cody, you dropped this back at the cafe," she said, her voice tinged with exhaustion but steady. Her fingers trembled slightly, either from the cold or the hesitation of approaching a stranger. Cody blinked in disbelief. "Oh, thank you," he stammered, accepting the wallet. His fingers brushed hers briefly, and he noticed the deep lines etched into her skin, the dirt beneath her nails. He glanced down at the wallet, checking the cash and cards inside. Everything was intact. She could have taken it all, but she didn't. "You didn't have to do this," Cody said softly, glancing up at her. "It wasn't mine," she replied simply, shrugging as if the answer was self-evident. Her honesty left him momentarily speechless. Cody studied her more closely. Her jeans were frayed, and the soles of her sneakers were worn thin. Her eyes, though tired, held a quiet dignity that belied her appearance. "You look like you could use a warm meal and a dry place to sit," he said before he could stop himself. "Please, let me take you somewhere. What happens next will shock everyone. But before we start, let's do something fun. Comment your location below. Let's see who's watching from a farthest place. All right, let's begin." The woman's eyes widened, her body tensing as if bracing for a trap. "I am fine," she stammered, taking a half step back. "Really, it's the least I can do," Cody insisted. "You went out of your way for me. Let me return the favor." For a moment, the two stood there, the rain falling between them. Cody could see her weighing his words, debating whether to trust him. Finally, she nodded, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Just for a little while," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Great, I'm Cody," he said with a reassuring smile. "Bria," she replied, her gaze darting to the sidewalk as if afraid to meet his eyes. "This way," Cody said, gesturing toward his car parked nearby. Bria hesitated but followed, her steps tentative, as if each one brought her closer to an inevitable mistake. Cody led her to his sleek black sedan, opening the passenger door for her. Bria slid inside cautiously, her soaked clothes leaving faint marks on the leather seat. Cody didn't mind as he started the car, stealing a glance at her. She sat stiffly, clutching her arms around herself, her gaze fixed on the rain-speckled window. Something about her felt familiar, but Cody couldn't quite place it. The drive back to his house was quiet, save for the rhythmic pattern of rain on the windshield. Cody didn't press her for conversation, sensing that Bria wasn't ready to talk. Instead, he focused on navigating the winding streets leading to his neighborhood, the dim lights of the city fading into the darkness. When they arrived at his house, Bria's eyes widened. Cody's home was a modern marvel nestled within Charleston's historic charm, a sleek white structure with large windows that glowed warmly against the rain. Bria hesitated, at the threshold, her hand lingering on the door frame. "It's just a house," Cody said gently, "and you're welcome here." Bria nodded wordlessly, stepping inside. The warmth of the house enveloped her immediately, and she visibly relaxed. Through her eyes darted around the space, as if expecting to find something out of place. The soft hum of an overhead light and the faint scent of lavender from a nearby diffuser filled the air. Cody set his briefcase down near the entrance and turned to her, offering a smile he hoped was reassuring. "Let me show you to the bathroom. You can clean up and get out of those wet clothes," he said, keeping his tone casual, sensing her lingering unease. Bria hesitated before nodding, her arms still wrapped tightly around herself. She followed Cody down a short hallway, her sneakers squeaking against the polished wooden floors. When he opened the door to the guest bathroom, she froze. The room was pristine and inviting, with gleaming marble tiles, a spacious glass shower, and a stack of plush towels neatly arranged on the counter. To her, it seemed almost unreal, like something out of a catalog. "I'll leave you to it," Cody said, stepping back to give her space. "There are towels here, and I'll leave some clothes outside the door for you." Bria nodded again, barely managing a whispered, "Thank you," as Cody retreated. She closed the door softly behind him, leaning her back against it for a moment. The silence of the room was deafening after the relentless noise of the streets. She let out a slow, shaky breath, running her fingers through her damp hair. Bria approached the sink cautiously, catching her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was almost unrecognizable. Her eyes were hollow, framed by dark circles, and her skin was pale beneath the grime. She reached up to touch her face, her fingers trembling. Turning on the faucet, she splashed warm water on her hands, letting the sensation ground her. Slowly, she began to peel off her wet clothes, folding them neatly on the counter. When she stepped under the shower, the hot water cascaded over her, loosening the knots in her muscles and washing away the remnants of the rain and dirt. Tears mingled with the water as memories she had tried to suppress came rushing back. Her mother's laugh, the smell of freshly sewn fabric in her boutique, the sharp sting of betrayal from the person she had once trusted most. She scrubbed her skin harder, as if she could wash away not just the physical grime, but also the weight of her past mistakes. Meanwhile, Cody busied himself in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal. His mind wandered back to Bria, replaying the moment she handed him the wallet. There was something in her voice, in her eyes, that stirred a faint but persistent memory. He had almost asked her about it during the drive, but stopped himself, not wanting to push her too soon. He placed a steaming bowl of chicken soup and a plate of fresh bread on the dining table, the aroma filling the room. He glanced at his watch and then toward the hallway, wondering how Bria was faring. Just as he was about to check on her, the soft sound of footsteps caught his attention. Bria appeared at the end of the hallway, wearing the clean clothes he had left for her, a plain sweater and a pair of joggers that were slightly too big but comfortable. Her hair was damp and combed back, and for the first time, her face was free of the grime and weariness that had obscured her features. Cody stood, gesturing to the table. "I made some soup. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm." Bria hesitated at the edge of the room, her eyes scanning the space before settling on the table. The aroma seemed to reach her, and her shoulders eased slightly. "Thank you," she said softly, stepping closer. They sat across from each other, the silence punctuated only by the clink of spoons against the bowls. Bria ate slowly, savoring each bite as though it was the first real meal she had had in a long time. Cody didn't push her to talk, giving her the space to feel comfortable. When she finally spoke, her voice was hesitant but clear. "Why are you doing this?" Cody paused, meeting her gaze. "Because you did something you didn't have to do. You could have kept my wallet, but you didn't. That says a lot about who you are." Bria looked down at her bowl, her fingers tightening around the spoon. "You don't know who I am," she said, her tone edged with bitterness. "You're right," Cody replied gently, "but I'd like to." The sincerity in his voice seemed to catch her off guard. She glanced up, her expression softening just a fraction. "I don't know where to start," she admitted. "Wherever you want," Cody said, leaning back slightly to ease the pressure of her reply. Bria looked away, her gaze drifting toward the window where rain continued to streak the glass. "It's been a long time since anyone cared enough to ask." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken for too long. Cody didn't press further, sensing that she needed time. "Well, I'm here," he said simply. Bria nodded slowly, her defenses starting to lower though not completely. Somewhere deep inside, a flicker of trust began to take root. In the quiet that followed, Cody realized that tonight was just the beginning. Whatever had brought Bria to this point in her life, he knew it wasn't a story that could be unraveled in one conversation, but he was willing to listen and, more importantly, to help. For the first time in years, Bria felt a fragile glimmer of hope, but the weight of the world still rested heavily on her chest. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, cleaner now, but still unfamiliar. The face staring back at her was one she barely recognized. Hollow eyes, sunken cheeks, and a tiredness that no amount of rest seemed able to erase. She rubbed the towel over her damp hair, taking in the gleaming marble countertops and the soft ambient lighting. It was the kind of bathroom she had only seen in magazines, a far cry from the drafty, grimy shelters where she had spent countless nights. For a moment, she allowed herself to savor the comfort, but the sensation was fleeting, quickly replaced by the gnawing unease of being somewhere she didn't belong. Her mind wandered as she dressed in the clean clothes Cody had left for her. They were simple, a loose sweater and sweatpants, but they felt impossibly luxurious against her freshly washed skin. She thought of the years before her life unraveled, when she could afford such small comforts without a second thought. Back then, she'd had a thriving boutique that she'd poured her heart and soul into. She could still remember the vibrant fabrics lining the shelves, the hum of her sewing machine, and the smiles of customers delighted by her designs. But that life had been swept away, dismantled piece by piece. Bria tried not to let her thoughts linger too long on the details, but the memories pushed their way to the surface like unwelcome guests. Her mother's sudden passing had been the first crack in the foundation, the loss tearing through her like a storm she couldn't weather. The boutique, her sanctuary, became too much to manage alone. Then came the betrayal. Her business partner, someone she had trusted implicitly, had siphoned off funds, leaving her with debts she couldn't repay. The shame of bankruptcy had been unbearable. She had tried to rebuild, but every door she knocked on seemed to slam in her face. The drinks, the pills, they hadn't been part of the plan. They were just supposed to dull the pain, but instead, they carved out a deeper void, pulling her into a spiral she couldn't escape. Bria's chest tightened as the memories flooded back. She forced herself to take a deep breath, grounding herself in the here and now. She was in a stranger's home, someone who, for reasons she couldn't understand, had offered her kindness without asking for anything in return. Cody seemed genuine, but years of hard lessons had taught her to question even the purest intentions. Gathering her courage, she stepped out of the bathroom and into the hallway. The faint aroma of food reached her, warm and inviting, guiding her toward the dining area. Cody stood by the table, adjusting the placement of bowls and plates. When he noticed her, he smiled warmly, gesturing for her to take a seat. "Feel better?" he asked, his tone light but kind. Bria nodded, pulling out a chair. "Yeah, thank you for all of this," she said quietly, her voice tinged with hesitation. "It's nothing," Cody replied, sitting across from her. "You've had a rough day. This is the least I can do." The simplicity of his response left her momentarily disarmed. She reached for the spoon in front of her, scooping up a bit of the chicken soup. The first bite was a revelation, a reminder of how long it had been since she tasted something homemade. They ate in relative silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. Cody watched her carefully, not with pity, but with quiet curiosity. He seemed content to let her set the pace, not pressing her to talk, but clearly open to listening if she chose to. Finally, Bria set her spoon down, the bowl nearly empty. She leaned back slightly, folding her arms across her chest. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, her tone cautious, but not accusatory. Cody hesitated for a moment before answering. "Because you didn't have to give me my wallet back," he said. "But you did. That tells me you're someone worth helping." Bria's lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't even know me," she muttered, avoiding his gaze. "Not yet," Cody admitted. "But everyone deserves a chance to be known." His words hung in the air, unchallenged, but not entirely accepted. Bria looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. There was a part of her that wanted to believe him, to accept the possibility of kindness without strings attached. But there was another part, louder and more persistent, that warned her not to let her guard down. "Eat as much as you want," Cody said, breaking the silence. "There's more in the pot if you're still hungry." Bria nodded, offering a small, almost imperceptible smile. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt the faintest flicker of comfort. It was fragile and fleeting, but it was there. And though she didn't know it yet, this was just the beginning of a long journey back to herself. As the meal wound down, Cody cleared the dishes with a practiced ease, leaving Bria alone at the table for a moment. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes wandering around the room. The house was immaculate, yet it had a warmth that suggested someone lived there, rather than merely occupying the space. There were framed photographs on a nearby shelf, but she didn't dare rise to inspect them. Instead, she allowed her gaze to rest on the soft glow of the pendant lights above the table, their steady illumination strangely comforting. Cody returned, setting 2 mugs of tea on the table. He sat down across from her, his movements deliberate but unhurried. "It's chamomile," he said. "Figured it might help you relax a bit." Bria nodded her thanks, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. The steam curled upward, carrying a delicate floral aroma. She inhaled deeply, letting the scent anchor her, even as her thoughts tugged at her like an insistent tide. "Can I ask what brought you here?" Cody said after a moment, his voice gentle but curious. Her fingers tightened slightly around the mug. It wasn't the first time she'd been asked that question, but it was the first time in a long while that it came from someone who seemed to genuinely care about the answer. She hesitated, the words forming on her tongue before dissolving into silence. "I mean," Cody added quickly, "you don't have to tell me if you're not ready. I just want to understand." Bria let out a shaky breath. "It's not a story people usually want to hear," she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the tea. "Try me," Cody replied, leaning forward slightly, his expression open and earnest. She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of judgment, finding none. She exhaled slowly, her defenses slipping just a fraction. "I had a boutique," she began, her voice hesitant but steady. "It wasn't anything big, but it was mine. I used to design clothes, mostly custom pieces. People loved it for a while." Cody listened intently, gently, his attention unwavering. "It started to fall apart after my mom passed," she continued, her tone tightening. "She was my biggest supporter, you know. Always there, cheering me on. When she was gone, it was like I lost the ground under my feet." Her eyes glistened, but she quickly blinked away the tears, threatening to fall. "Then my partner, someone I trusted, stole from me. I couldn't pay the bills. The shop closed, and everything just unraveled after that." Cody's expression softened, his chest tightening as he absorbed her words. He didn't interrupt, letting her set the pace. "I tried to pick myself up," Bria whispered. "I really did. But every time I thought I was getting somewhere, something else would knock me down. And then the drinking started, and eventually, other things. I just wanted to forget for a little while." The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Bria looked away, embarrassed by how much she had shared, but also strangely relieved to have said it aloud. "I'm sorry," Cody said quietly. "No one should have to go through all that alone." Bria shrugged, the gesture small but resigned. "It's just life," she said, though the bitterness in her tone betrayed the words. Cody hesitated before speaking again. "Maybe, but it doesn't have to stay that way. You can rebuild. It's not too late." She shook her head, a hollow laugh escaping her lips. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," Cody admitted. "But I've seen people do it, and I've seen what happens when no one gives them the chance to try." Bria's gaze shifted back to him, her brow furrowing slightly. There was something about the way he spoke, as if he was drawing from his own experiences. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice quieter now, less defensive. Cody leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it," he said, "and it made all the difference. I can't change what you've been through, but maybe I can help you take the first step forward." His words settled over her like a blanket, warming something inside her that she hadn't realized was cold. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. Hope? Maybe. Or the faintest trace of trust. She nodded slowly, her fingers loosening their grip on the mug. "I don't know if I can do it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's okay," Cody replied, his tone steady. "You don't have to know right now. Just start with tonight." The simplicity of his statement grounded her, and she found herself nodding again. Tonight. Just tonight. And as the rain continued to patter against the windows, Bria felt, for the first time in a long time, the possibility of a beginning. The next morning, Cody stepped into the living room to find Bria sitting quietly on the edge of the couch. She was already dressed, her damp hair from the night before now neatly brushed. Her gaze was fixed on the window, where the soft morning light spilled into the room. She looked different, less guarded, though the weariness in her eyes remained. "Morning," Cody said gently, not wanting to startle her. Bria turned to him, offering a small but genuine smile. "Morning," she replied. Cody motioned toward the kitchen. "I made some coffee. Figured we could both use it." She hesitated before nodding, following him into the kitchen. As he poured 2 cups, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. Bria took the cup he offered, cradling it in her hands, but not drinking right away. They sat across from each other at the small breakfast table, the silence stretching between them. Cody studied her, noting the way her fingers tapped lightly against the ceramic mug, a nervous rhythm that betrayed her unease. "You don't have to stay," she said suddenly, her voice soft but firm. Cody tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "I appreciate everything you've done," Bria continued, her eyes fixed on the dark liquid in her cup. "But I don't want to overstay my welcome. I can figure something out." Cody leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You don't have to rush back out there," he said. "Not yet. You've had 1 night of rest. It's not enough to rebuild from everything you've been through." Bria shook her head, a humorless laugh escaping her lips. "Rebuild? I don't even know where to start." "Well," Cody said thoughtfully, "you could start by letting people help. Let me help." Her eyes snapped up to meet his, and for a moment, Cody saw the storm of emotions swirling within her: fear, doubt, and perhaps a flicker of hope. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this for me?" Cody hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because someone helped me once," he said. "When I was at my lowest, someone took a chance on me. I've never forgotten it." Bria frowned slightly, curiosity replacing some of the skepticism in her expression. "What happened?" Cody leaned back, his gaze distant as he recalled his own story. "When I first moved to Charleston, I was drowning in debt and completely lost. I didn't think I'd make it. But there was a man, an old family friend, who saw potential in me when no one else did. He gave me a job, a place to stay, and a chance to prove myself." Bria listened intently, her fingers gripping the mug a little tighter. "I don't know where I'd be now if he hadn't stepped in," Cody admitted. "So when I see someone who deserves a second chance, I try to pay it forward. That's all this is." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Bria looked away, her jaw tightening. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm not sure I deserve it." Cody smiled gently. "I think you do. And you don't have to figure it all out at once. Just take it 1 step at a time." Bria nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling over her. She didn't entirely believe him yet, but there was something in his tone, steady and unwavering, that made her want to try. Cody pushed his chair back, standing. "There's a little cafe down the street that makes the best breakfast. What do you say we grab something to eat? My treat." Bria hesitated, glancing toward the window as if considering her escape. Then she nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Okay." As they left the house, Cody couldn't shake the feeling that something about Bria seemed familiar, like a memory just out of reach. But he kept his thoughts to himself, choosing instead to focus on the small victory of her agreeing to come along. For the first time in a long while, Bria let herself imagine what one small step forward might look like. The cafe was nestled in a corner of Charleston's historic district, its brick facade adorned with trailing ivy and a small chalkboard sign advertising the day's specials. Inside, the air was warm and inviting, filled with the hum of quiet conversation and the clinking of dishes. Cody held the door open for Bria, who hesitated briefly before stepping inside. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the rustic wooden tables and shelves lined with books and small potted plants. It was a cozy space, yet Bria seemed wary, as if she didn't quite belong. Cody noticed and gave her a reassuring nod, leading her to a table near the window. A waitress approached with a cheerful smile, placing menus in front of them. "Good morning. Can I get you both some coffee or tea to start?" "Coffee for me," Cody said, glancing at Bria. "Same," she replied, her voice so quiet it barely registered. The waitress nodded and disappeared toward the counter. Bria opened the menu but didn't seem to be reading it, her eyes flicking nervously to the other patrons. Cody leaned forward slightly, his voice low and steady. "It's just breakfast," he said. "Nothing to worry about." She met his gaze, exhaling slowly. "I haven't done this in a long time," she admitted. "That's okay," Cody said. "Start small. One step at a time. Remember?" Bria nodded, her grip on the menu loosening. When the waitress returned, they placed their orders, eggs and toast for Bria, a breakfast platter for Cody. As they waited for the food, Cody decided to steer the conversation somewhere lighter. "Do you remember anything about high school?" he asked, his tone casual but curious. Bria blinked, clearly caught off guard by the question. "Not much," she said cautiously. "Why?" "Well," Cody said, a small smile forming, "I think we went to the same school." Bria frowned slightly, leaning back in her chair. "We did." "Yeah, Lincoln High, class of 2005, Cody replied. "I'm pretty sure we had biology together, junior year." Bria's brow furrowed as she searched her memory. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but her memories of that time were hazy. Then, like a photograph coming into focus, a faint recollection surfaced, a boy sitting near the back of the classroom, scribbling furiously in a notebook. "Cody Miller?" she said slowly, as if testing the name. "That's me," he said, his smile widening. Her eyes widened slightly. "You were the one who—" She stopped, the memory hitting her fully. "You used to get picked on by, what was his name?" "Trevor. Trevor Daniels," Cody supplied with a chuckle. "Yeah, he made it his mission to ruin my life until you told him off in front of the whole class." Bria's cheeks flushed. "I don't even remember what I said." "Well, I do," Cody said, leaning back in his chair. "You called him a wannabe thug with a peanut brain." The whole class laughed, and Trevor never bothered me again. Bria couldn't help but smile at the memory, the first genuine smile Cody had seen from her. "I can't believe you remember that." "It was a big deal to me," Cody said. "You stood up for me when no one else would. I will never forget it." Bria looked down at her hands, her expression softening. "I guess I used to be braver," she said quietly. "Maybe you still are," Cody replied. Before Bria could respond, the waitress returned with their plates, setting them down with a cheerful, "Enjoy." Bria picked up her fork, eyeing the food warily before taking a small bite. Cody watched her out of the corner of his eye, giving her space as she slowly relaxed into the moment. For the rest of the meal, the conversation flowed more easily. They shared small stories from their high school days, Cody filling in gaps in Bria's memory with anecdotes that made her laugh softly. By the time they left the cafe, Bria felt lighter, though the weight of her circumstances still lingered. As they walked back to the car, she glanced at Cody, her voice hesitant but sincere. "Thank you for breakfast and for reminding me of who I used to be." Cody smiled warmly. "You're still that person, Bria. You just need a chance to see it." As they drove back to his house, Bria couldn't shake the feeling that her small steps were leading her somewhere meaningful, even if she couldn't quite see the destination yet. For the first time in years, she felt the faintest pull of something she'd thought she'd lost forever, hope. Cody leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone. The events of the past 2 days played over in his mind like a film reel. Bria's tentative steps toward trusting him had been small but significant. Still, he knew that breakfast and a shower wouldn't solve everything. There were deeper wounds that couldn't be mended overnight. He glanced toward the living room, where Bria sat curled up on the couch, flipping through an old magazine he had left on the coffee table. Her posture was relaxed, but her guarded expression hadn't entirely faded. Cody knew that taking the next step would require more than kindness. It would need careful thought and the right support. He dialed a number and waited as the line rang. A warm, confident voice answered on the other end. "Celine Harper," she said. "Celine, it's Cody," he replied. "Cody, haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on?" "I need your help," he said, his tone serious. He explained Bria's situation carefully, outlining what little she had shared with him so far. Celine listened without interrupting, her calm professionalism reassuring Cody that he had made the right choice in calling her. She was a longtime friend and a dedicated advocate for community outreach programs, with a special focus on helping those struggling to get back on their feet. "Sounds like she's been through a lot," Celine said when he finished. "Does she want help?" Cody hesitated, glancing toward the living room again. "I think so, but I'm not sure she knows where to start. She's been out there for a long time." Celine's voice softened. "That's common. It's hard to ask for help when you've been let down so many times. But if she's willing to talk, I can work with her. We'll start small, basic steps to get her grounded." "Can you bring her to the center?" Cody asked. "I'll talk to her," Celine promised. "Thanks, Celine. I owe you one." "You owe me a coffee," she teased lightly. "Now go talk to her before she changes her mind about trusting you." Cody ended the call, his resolve strengthening. He walked into the living room and paused by the couch. Bria glanced up, her brow furrowing slightly at his serious expression. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," Cody said, sitting in the armchair across from her. "I've been thinking. I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to push you into anything, but I think I know someone who can help." Bria's fingers tightened around the edge of the magazine. "Help how?" "She's a friend of mine," Cody explained. "Her name is Celine, and she works with people who've been in tough spots. She's smart, kind, and she knows what she's doing. She can help you figure out what comes next." Bria looked away, her jaw tightening. "I don't." "No," she said after a moment. "I've tried trusting people before, and it didn't end well." "I get that," Cody said, his voice steady. "And I know this is asking a lot, but I wouldn't suggest this if I didn't believe it could help. You've already taken a step by being here." Bria was silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. Cody leaned forward, his tone softening. "It doesn't have to be today, or even tomorrow. Just think about it, okay?" She nodded slowly, though her expression remained guarded. Cody knew it wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was a start. Later that afternoon, Bria sat by the window, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. Cody had given her space after their conversation, retreating to his office to make a few calls. Her thoughts swirled with uncertainty, tugging her in different directions. The idea of meeting someone like Celine was daunting, but so was the thought of stepping back into the world she had left behind. Her fingers absently traced the edge of her mug as memory surfaced, times she had reached out for help, only to be met with indifference or outright rejection. But Cody's quiet persistence felt different. He wasn't forcing her. He was just offering her a hand. That made it harder to dismiss. The sound of footsteps broke her reverie, and she turned to see Cody entering the room with his usual calm demeanor. He held a slip of paper in his hand, which he placed gently on the coffee table in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, eyeing the paper warily. "It's the address for Celine's community center," Cody said. "I thought you might want to have it just in case." Bria picked up the paper, her fingers brushing over the neat handwriting. The name of the center, Harbor Haven, stood out in bold letters, alongside a phone number and a few lines about their services. "They specialize in all kinds of support," Cody added, sitting across from her. "Housing resources, therapy, job assistance, whatever you might need. You don't have to do everything at once. Just take a look if you're curious." Bria stared at the paper, her emotions tangled. "You really think this will help?" "I do," Cody said firmly. "But only if you're ready. No one's going to force you to do anything." She nodded, folding the paper carefully and tucking it into the pocket of her sweater. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "That's all I ask," Cody replied with a warm smile. The next morning, Bria surprised herself by asking Cody if he would take her to Harbor Haven. She felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach as he drove, the weight of the decision pressing on her. But Cody's calm presence helped, his quiet encouragement filling the space between her doubts. When they arrived, the center's facade was welcoming, with bright flowers lining the walkway and a banner that read, "Everyone deserves a fresh start." Bria hesitated as they approached the door, her feet feeling like they were weighed down. "Ready?" Cody asked gently. "No," Bria admitted, clutching her hands together. "But I'm here," Cody said. "That's enough." He held the door open for her. Inside, they were greeted by a woman with a warm smile and a clipboard. "Hi there, I'm Celine," she said, extending her hand to Bria. Bria hesitated for a moment before shaking it. Celine's grip was firm but kind, and her presence immediately felt reassuring. "Cody told me a little about you," Celine said, her tone conversational. "But I'd love to hear about you from you, whenever you're ready." Bria nodded, her nerves easing slightly under Celine's steady gaze. "I don't know where to start," she admitted. "That's okay," Celine said. "We'll start wherever you want." The simplicity of her words was disarming, and Bria felt a flicker of hope take root for the first time in a long while. She allowed herself to imagine the possibility of a path forward. Cody watched from a few steps back, his heart lifting as Bria and Celine began to talk. He didn't know exactly where this journey would lead her, but he was certain of one thing. She wasn't walking it alone anymore. As he stepped outside to let them continue in private, Cody found himself smiling. The sunlight felt warmer, and the world seemed just a little brighter. He had taken a chance, and so had Bria. For now, that was enough. Bria sat on the edge of a metal-framed cot, her fingers gripping the edges of the thin blanket draped across her lap. The room around her was plain but clean, a small shared space at Harbor Haven where newcomers could settle during their first few nights. The walls were painted a soft blue, intended to be calming, but Bria felt anything but calm. She glanced at the small duffel bag Cody had handed her before leaving, clothes, toiletries, and a notebook he had insisted she take. "Write down whatever you're feeling," he had said. "Sometimes it helps." She hadn't touched it yet. The air felt heavy as Bria replayed her first conversation with Celine earlier that day. Celine had explained the basics of the program, speaking with a mix of warmth and practicality that Bria couldn't quite decide whether to find comforting or intimidating. The structure of it all, the schedules, the meetings, the expectations, felt overwhelming. Bria wasn't sure if she could stick with it, but the alternative was stepping back into the uncertainty of the streets. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Before Bria could answer, a young woman with bright eyes and a clipboard stepped inside. "Hey there, I'm Anna," she said, her voice light and friendly. "I'm one of the staff here, just checking in to see how you're settling." Bria forced a small smile. "I'm okay, I guess." Anna nodded, pulling up a chair. "That's fair. The first day is always the hardest. I've seen it 100 times, and trust me, it gets easier." Bria raised an eyebrow. "Does it?" Anna's grin widened. "I wouldn't lie to you, but it takes work and patience. The good news is you've got both of those in you, whether you realize it or not." Bria didn't respond, her gaze dropping to the floor. Anna leaned forward slightly, her voice softening. "Look, I know it feels like a lot right now, but you don't have to figure everything out today. Just take it one piece at a time. Start small." She pointed at the duffel bag. "Maybe unpack that bag and write something in the notebook, even if it's just a single word. That's enough for now." Bria hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Thanks," she murmured. "No problem," Anna said, standing up. "I'll be around if you need anything, and there's a group meeting tonight. You don't have to say anything if you're not ready. Just listen. Sometimes hearing other people's stories helps more than you'd think." After Anna left, The room felt quieter than ever. Bria stared at the notebook for a long moment before reaching for it. She opened it slowly, the blank pages staring back at her like a challenge. Finally, she picked up the pen Cody had packed and wrote a single word in the center of the page: lost. Her chest tightened as she looked at the word, but she didn't stop. Beneath it, she began to write, "I don't know who I am anymore, but maybe I want to find out." The simple act of writing felt like opening a door she hadn't known was there. It was a small step, but it was hers. That evening, Bria found herself in a small circle of chairs in one of Harbor Haven's meeting rooms. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, and the faint scent of coffee lingered in the air from the refreshment table in the corner. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Around her sat 8 other people, each with their own worn expressions and weary postures. A few exchanged polite nods with her, while others kept their gazes fixed on the floor. At the center of the circle was Celine, her calm and steady presence grounding the room. "Welcome, everyone," Celine began, her voice warm but firm. "For those of you who are new, this is a safe space. We're here to share, to listen, and to support each other. There's no judgment here, only understanding." Bria glanced at the others, wondering if they truly felt as unguarded as Celine made it sound. She doubted it. Celine gestured toward a man with graying hair and tired eyes. "Victor, would you like to start us off?" Victor nodded, rubbing his hands together as he spoke. "It's been a tough week," he admitted, his voice low but steady. "The cravings are still there, stronger than I'd like, but I've been keeping busy working on a project in the shop. It helps." There were murmurs of encouragement from the group, and Victor offered a faint smile before falling quiet again. One by one, others in the circle spoke. A woman named Denise talked about reconnecting with her estranged daughter. A younger man named Lise shared his struggles with finding stable work. Each story was different, but the emotions behind them, pain, fear, hope, felt achingly familiar to Bria. When it was her turn, Celine turned to her with an encouraging nod. "Bria, would you like to share?" Her throat tightened, and for a moment, she thought about shaking her head. But something in Celine's gaze, patient and unyielding, kept her from retreating. She swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair. "I don't really know what to say," Bria began, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's okay," Celine said gently. "Start wherever you feel comfortable." Bria hesitated, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I'm not even sure why I'm here," she admitted. "I've lost so much, and sometimes it feels like I've lost myself too." She felt the weight of the group's attention, but it wasn't suffocating. It was supportive, encouraging. "I used to have a shop," Bria continued, her voice gaining a little strength. "I had a life that felt solid, like it couldn't fall apart. But it did, and I still don't know how to put it back together." Her words hung in the air, raw and unpolished, but they felt like a release. Victor nodded in understanding. "It's not easy," he said softly, "but you've already started, just by being here." There were murmurs of agreement from the group, and Bria felt a faint warmth stir within her chest. She wasn't alone by the end of the meeting. Bria felt drained but lighter, as if a small part of the burden she carried had been shared among those around her. Celine approached her as the others filtered out, her smile reassuring. "You did good tonight," Celine said. "It's not easy to open up, but you did it." Bria nodded, her voice soft. "Thanks. It helped." As she returned to her room that night, Bria opened the notebook again. This time, the words came more easily. "Maybe I'm not as lost as I thought. Maybe I'm finding my way back." She closed the notebook, a flicker of hope settling in her heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time, she felt like she might be ready to face them. Bria sat in a small, quiet room with pale green walls and a simple wooden desk. Across from her sat a therapist named Carla, recommended by Celine. She watched Bria with a calm and patient expression. The silence between them stretched long enough to feel heavy, but Carla didn't rush her. She simply waited, letting Bria take her time. Bria fiddled with her hands, her gaze fixed on a spot on the desk. Finally, she spoke. "I don't really know how this works." Carla offered a reassuring smile. There's no right or wrong way, Bria. We just talk. Whatever's on your mind, whatever feels important to you. Bria nodded slowly, though her hands remained restless. I guess I don't even know where to start, she admitted. How about what brought you here? Carla suggested gently. Bria hesitated, her thoughts tangled. She knew the answer, but putting it into words felt daunting. Everything just fell apart, she said finally, her voice quiet. My mom passed away. My business went under, and then, I don't know. It all just unraveled. Carla nodded, her expression soft but focused. That's a lot for anyone to handle. Losing your mother, your business. It must have felt overwhelming. Bria let out a shaky breath. It was. She was the one person who always believed in me. Losing her felt like losing my anchor. And after that, Carla prompted gently. I tried to keep going, Bria said, her voice tinged with frustration. But nothing worked. I trusted the wrong people, I made mistakes, and before I knew it, I was here, a million miles from the person I used to be. Carla leaned forward slightly. And who was that person? Bria blinked, the question catching her off guard. I don't know anymore, she said after a moment. I thought I was someone strong, capable. But now, her words trailed off, and she shook her head. Carla waited a beat before speaking again. It's okay not to have all the answers right now, but the fact that you're here, talking about it, shows that part of you, the strong, capable part, is still there. Bria looked up, her eyes meeting Carla's for the first time. There was no judgment in her gaze, only understanding. Maybe, Bria said softly, but it doesn't feel that way. It might not yet. Carla acknowledged, but healing isn't about feeling strong all the time. It's about facing the things that hurt and finding a way through them. The words settled over Bria, sinking deeper than she expected. She nodded, a small flicker of resolve sparking within her. Carla leaned back, her tone shifting slightly. Would you be open to exploring some of those feelings, the loss, the betrayal, whatever comes to mind? Bria hesitated, but then nodded. I can try. Good, Carla said with a gentle smile. That's all we need for now. As the session continued, Bria found herself speaking more freely than she had anticipated. Each word felt like lifting a stone from the pile she had been carrying for so long. It was painful, but it was also a release, a tentative step towards something she hadn't dared hope for, peace. The next session came faster than Bria expected. She had spent the hours in between replaying the first conversation with Carla in her mind, analyzing her own words and the emotions they'd stirred. It had been exhausting, but strangely cathartic, like peeling back layers of a bandage she hadn't realized she'd been wearing. When she stepped into the room, this time, Carla greeted her with the same calm smile. The familiar setting offered a sliver of comfort. Bria sat down, her posture a little less rigid than before. How was your week? Carla asked, easing into the conversation. Bria shrugged, but there was a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Better, I think. I've been writing in that notebook Cody gave me. Just little things, memories, thoughts. That's a great step, Carla encouraged. Writing can help you process things that feel too heavy to say out loud. Bria nodded, fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. It's not all good stuff, though. Some of it feels ugly, like things I don't even want to admit to myself. Carla tilted her head slightly. Ugly doesn't mean it's not worth acknowledging. Sometimes facing the hardest parts of ourselves is what allows us to heal. Bria hesitated before speaking, her voice quieter. I've been thinking about my mom a lot, about how I let her down. Carla's expression softened. Why do you feel you let her down? Bria's chest tightened. She worked so hard to give me a better life. She believed in me, and I ruined everything. You lost your business, Carla said gently. But that doesn't mean you let her down. Grief can make us feel responsible for things that were never in our control. Do you think your mother would blame you for what happened? Bria shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. No, she'd probably tell me to get back up and try again. Again, that's the kind of person she was. And what would she say about where you are now? Carla asked. Bria hesitated, wiping her eyes. I think she'd tell me I'm stronger than I think I am, that I still have a chance to make something of myself. Carla smiled softly. Sounds like she had a lot of faith in you. Maybe it's time to start having a little faith in yourself, too. Bria nodded slowly, the words sinking in. For the first time, the weight of her mother's absence felt less like a chain and more like a reminder of the strength she had passed down. Carla leaned forward, her tone gentle but purposeful. You mentioned betrayal before, your business partner. Would you like to talk about that today? Bria stiffened slightly. The mention of her former partner stirred a fresh wave of anger and pain. She took a deep breath, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair. It's hard, she admitted. That's okay, Carla reassured her. Take your time. We can start small. Bria closed her eyes, forcing herself to focus. She began to speak, her words slow and measured. We were friends, at least I thought we were. I trusted her with everything, the finances, the decisions. I didn't think she... Her voice broke, and she paused, swallowing hard. Carla waited patiently, giving her the space to continue. I didn't think she'd take it all, Bria said finally, her voice trembling. She left me with nothing. I was already struggling after my mom, and then she just walked away like I didn't matter. The rawness of her words hung in the air, and Bria felt a pang of vulnerability. But Carla's steady presence grounded her, and she continued. I hate her for what she did, Bria admitted. But I hate myself too, for not seeing it coming, for being so stupid. Carla shook her head gently. You trusted someone you cared about, Bria. That's not stupidity, it's human. What she did says more about her than it does about you. Bria's grip on the chair loosened slightly, and she nodded. The conversation left her drained but lighter, as if a small piece of the burden she carried had been lifted. By the end of the session, she found herself scribbling more in her notebook. Her thoughts flow more freely. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was beginning to make sense of the chaos within her. As she walked back to her room at Harbor Haven, a new thought entered her mind. Maybe the person I used to be wasn't lost forever. Maybe she was just waiting to be rediscovered. Bria stood in the sunlight, just outside Harbor Haven, squinting as the breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers from a nearby planter. It had been weeks since her first meeting with Celine, and though each day was a battle, she felt stronger. The walls she had carefully built around herself weren't gone, but they were beginning to crack. Today, however, felt different. Celine had suggested she take a break from her usual routine and spend time reconnecting with something that brought her joy. At first, Bria had scoffed at the idea. Joy seemed like a distant memory, something she wasn't sure she could access anymore. But as she stood there holding the small map Cody had handed her with a mischievous smile, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of curiosity. The destination was a boutique Cody had mentioned, a small, locally owned shop in downtown Charleston. It reminded me of what you used to talk about back in high school, he had said. His encouragement had planted a seed of hope, and now, as Bria approached the shop, she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside. The space was cozy and inviting, with racks of colorful clothing arranged neatly and the faint smell of lavender in the air. A woman in her late 40s, with curly hair and a kind smile, approached her from behind the counter. Welcome. Let me know if there's anything you'd like help with, the woman said warmly. Bria nodded, offering a small smile in return. She wandered through the shop, her fingers brushing against the fabrics. Each piece seemed carefully crafted, the kind of work that once would have inspired her own designs. Memories of her boutique surfaced, its vibrant displays, the satisfaction of creating something from nothing, and the pride on her mother's face whenever she saw Bria's work. Bria didn't notice the shop owner had returned until she spoke. You have an eye for detail, the woman said. Are you a designer? Bria hesitated, the question catching her off guard. I used to be, she admitted, her voice tinged with regret. Used to be? The woman echoed, raising an eyebrow. You don't just stop being a designer. It's part of who you are. The word struck a chord deep within Bria. She glanced down at the scarf in her hands, running her fingers over the intricate stitching. It doesn't feel that way anymore, she said quietly. The woman studied her for a moment before speaking. Sometimes, you just need a little reminder. If you ever feel like sharing your work, I'd love to see it. We're always looking for local talent to feature here. Bria blinked, surprised by the offer. I don't know if I have anything worth showing, she said. Take your time, the woman replied with a gentle smile. If you ever change your mind, the door's always open. As Bria left the shop, her heart felt lighter. The woman's words lingered in her mind, stirring something she hadn't felt in years, the possibility of a fresh start. The walk back to Harbor Haven was filled with conflicting emotions. Bria clutched the business card the boutique owner had handed her, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. A small part of her wanted to toss it away, convinced she wasn't ready, but another part, the one that had been quietly growing stronger, urged her to hold on to it. When she arrived back at the center, Cody was waiting near the entrance, leaning casually against the railing. He straightened when he saw her, a small grin spreading across his face. So, how'd it go? He asked, his tone light but curious. Bria hesitated, slipping the card into her pocket before answering. It was nice. The shop was beautiful. It reminded me of what I used to have. Cody nodded, his expression thoughtful. And how does that feel? Bria sighed, sitting down on the bench nearby. Complicated. Part of me misses it, but another part feels like that life is too far gone, like I'm fooling myself for even thinking about it. Cody sat beside her, giving her space to process her thoughts. I don't think it's foolish to remember the things that made you happy, he said. If anything, it's a sign that they're still important to you. Bria didn't respond right away, her gaze fixed on a patch of flowers blooming in the garden. The shop owner said I should show her my work someday, she said finally. But I haven't designed anything in years. I wouldn't even know where to start. Cody's eyes lit up with an idea. What if you start small? Maybe sketch out a few ideas, just to see how it feels. Bria frowned. I don't even have the supplies anymore. I think we can fix that, Cody said, standing. Come on, I've got an idea. Curious but skeptical, Bria followed him into the city. They stopped at a local art supply store, its windows filled with vibrant displays of paints, sketchbooks, and fabrics. Inside, Cody grabbed a basket and handed it to Bria. Pick whatever you need, he said, his tone casual. Bria stared at him, her brow furrowing. Cody, I can't let you. It's not a big deal, he interrupted, giving her a reassuring smile. Consider it an investment in your future designs. Reluctantly, Bria began selecting items, sketch pads, pencils, and a few bolts of fabric that caught her eye. She moved cautiously, as if unsure she deserved the gesture, but Cody's patience and encouragement gradually eased her hesitation. When they returned to Harbor Haven, Bria carried the bag of supplies into her room, her heart pounding. She set everything down on the desk, staring at it as though it might disappear if she looked away. After a long moment, she reached for a pencil and a fresh sheet of paper. Her hand hovered over the blank page, uncertainty gripping her. Then, with a deep breath, she began to draw. The lines were shaky at first, the movements awkward and unsure, but as she continued, something shifted. The pencil felt more natural in her hand, and memories of countless late nights spent sketching designs came flooding back. By the time she set the pencil down, the page was filled with the beginnings of a dress design, simple yet elegant, with clean lines and a touch of flair that reflected her old style. Bria stared at it, a mixture of pride and disbelief washing over her. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of the person she used to be. It was faint, but it was real. As she ran her fingers over the sketch, she realized it was a step forward, a small but powerful step toward reclaiming her passion and her sense of self. Bria sat on the edge of her bed, staring down at the sketchbook in her hands. The pages were filling up quickly, each one more vibrant and detailed than the last. Over the past few weeks, the designs had started coming back to her, fluid shapes and patterns that felt like second nature. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was beginning to feel like herself again. But today, the spark that had carried her this far fell dimmer. Her sketches from the night before, which had seemed so promising at the time, now looked amateurish. She flipped through the pages, her doubts growing with each turn. A sharp knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she said hesitantly, closing the sketchbook and setting it aside. Celine stepped in, her ever-calm demeanor immediately grounding the room. "Hey, I thought I might find you here," she said, leaning against the doorframe. Bria managed a faint smile. "Just working on some sketches." "That's great," Celine said, her eyes lighting up. "Can I see?" Bria hesitated, her fingers twitching toward the sketchbook. "They're not that good," she said, her voice faltering. "Let me be the judge of that," Celine said, her tone encouraging but firm. Reluctantly, Bria handed her the book. Celine flipped through the pages, her expression unreadable at first, but as she reached the later sketches, a smile spread across her face. "Bria, these are fantastic," she said, holding up one of the pages. "You've got real talent." Bria looked down, her cheeks warming. "They're just ideas. I don't know if they're worth anything." Celine set the sketchbook down, taking a seat beside her. "Let me tell you something I've learned from working here," she said. "Sometimes, the things we dismiss as just ideas are the very things that can pull us out of the dark. These sketches, they're more than just lines on paper. They're proof that you're fighting your way back." Bria nodded slowly, Celine's words settling over her. "I want to believe that," she admitted. "But sometimes, it feels like no matter how hard I try, the past is still there, waiting to drag me back down." "That's a real fear," Celine said, her voice softening. "But you're not the same person you were back then. You've been through fire and come out stronger. And when you stumble, and you will stumble, you've got people here to help you back up." The word struck a chord, and Bria felt tears welling up. "I'm just scared," she said quietly. "That's okay," Celine replied. "Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. It just means you care about what happens next." Bria nodded again, wiping her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt a fragile sense of hope, one that was stronger than her fear. Later that afternoon, Bria decided to push past her doubts and take the next step. She had been staring at the boutique owner's business card all morning, its embossed lettering practically daring her to act. With a deep breath, she picked up her phone and dialed the number. "Hello." The familiar, friendly voice of the shop owner answered. "Hi, this is Bria," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We met a few weeks ago at your shop. You mentioned I could show you my designs." "Oh, Bria," the woman said warmly. "Of course I remember. I'm so glad you called. When would you like to stop by?" Bria hesitated, feeling the weight of her decision. "Maybe tomorrow, if that's okay." "That's perfect," the woman replied. "Bring whatever you've got, and we'll take a look together. No pressure." After ending the call, Bria let out a shaky breath. Her nerves buzzed, but there was also a spark of excitement. She spent the rest of the day going through her sketchbook, carefully selecting the designs she thought showed the most promise. The next morning, Cody drove her to the boutique. As they pulled up, Bria's stomach churned with anxiety. "You've got this," Cody said, his tone steady and reassuring. "Just be yourself." Bria nodded, clutching her portfolio as she stepped out of the car. The ship's bell jiggled as she entered, and the owner greeted her with the same warm smile she remembered. "Bria, I'm so glad you're here," the woman said, motioning her toward a small seating area near the back of the shop. "Let's take a look at what you've brought." Bria carefully opened her portfolio, laying out her sketches on the table. The shop owner examined each one with a critical yet thoughtful eye, occasionally nodding or murmuring to herself. "These are wonderful," she said after a while, her smile widening. "You have a real knack for combining elegance with a touch of boldness. I can see these pieces fitting perfectly with what we showcase here." Bria blinked, momentarily stunned. "Really? You think they're good enough?" "More than good enough," the owner replied. "In fact, I'd love to feature a couple of your designs in our next collection. If you're open to it, we can start with a small batch and see how they do." Bria's heart raced. "You mean, like actually selling them here?" "Exactly," the owner said. "I'll handle the logistics. You just focus on creating." As Bria left the shop, portfolio in hand, A new feeling took root, a sense of validation and purpose she hadn't felt in years. She climbed into Cody's car, her face flushed with excitement. "Well," Cody asked, glancing over at her. "She wants to feature my designs," Bria said, unable to contain her smile. Bria's voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I did it." Cody's face broke into a grin. "I told you, you've got this." Bria leaned back in her seat, clutching her portfolio tightly. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a looming threat. It felt like an open door, waiting for her to step through. The day of the community fundraiser arrived, and Harbor Haven buzzed with activity. Volunteers arranged rows of folding chairs in the large multi-purpose room, while others decorated the space with strings of twinkling lights and colorful banners. A small stage stood at one end of the room, flanked by a podium and a table displaying brochures about the center services. Bria stood near the back of the room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The sight of the stage made her stomach churn. Speaking in front of a crowd was never something she'd been comfortable with, and the thought of sharing her story felt like exposing a part of herself she had worked so hard to protect. Cody approached her, a bottle of water in one hand and a reassuring smile on his face. "Hey," he said, offering her the bottle. "Are you doing okay?" Bria took it, twisting the cap nervously. "Not really," she admitted. "I don't know if I can do this, Cody. What if I mess up? What if no one cares about what I have to say?" He placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but comforting. "You've been through so much, Bria, and you've come so far. Sharing your story isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. People will care because your journey matters." Bria nodded slowly, though her nerves remained. "It just feels so vulnerable." "I get that," Cody said. "But think about how many people you might inspire. Someone out there needs to hear what you've been through to believe they can get through their own struggles." She looked at him, his words settling over her like a blanket of reassurance. Taking a deep breath, she nodded again, more firmly this time. "Okay, I'll try." As the event began, people filled the room, chatting excitedly as they found their seats. Celine took the stage, welcoming everyone with her usual poise and charisma. She spoke about the importance of community, of supporting one another, and of celebrating the courage it takes to ask for help. "And now," Celine said, her voice warm and inviting, "I'd like to introduce someone who embodies that courage. Please join me in welcoming Bria, one of our very own, who has an incredible story to share." The applause was deafening, and Bria felt her legs turn to jelly as she stood. Cody gave her a small nod of encouragement, and she took a shaky step toward the stage. As she approached the podium, her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the entire room could hear it. She gripped the edges of the podium, her knuckles white, and took a deep breath. The sea of faces staring back at her was overwhelming, but she spotted Cody and Celine in the front row, their smiles steadying her nerves. Bria cleared her throat, her voice wavering as she began. "Hi, my name is Bria, and for a long time, I didn't think I'd ever be standing in a place like this." Bria paused, her throat tightening as the weight of her words settled in the air. She looked down at her hands, gripping the edges of the podium, and took a deep breath. The room was silent, every face turned toward her, waiting. "For years, I thought I had everything figured out," she continued, her voice steadying as she spoke. "I had a business I loved, people who believed in me, and a future that seemed so certain. But then, piece by piece, it all fell apart." She hesitated, her gaze sweeping across the audience. She caught a glimpse of a woman near the back, nodding slowly, as if she understood every word. It gave Bria a flicker of courage. "I lost my mother," she said, her voice softening with the memory. "She was my anchor, my biggest supporter. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. After that," she continued, "I made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, let fear and anger take over, and before I knew it, I had nothing left." Bria's fingers loosened slightly on the podium as she found her rhythm. The words began to flow, each one lighter than the last. "For a long time, I thought I didn't deserve a second chance," she said, her voice gaining strength. I believed I was too far gone, too broken to fix. But then something happened. Someone saw me. Not for the mess I thought I was, but for the person I could still be. They gave me a chance to believe in myself again. Her gaze landed on Cody, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. Coming to Harbor Haven wasn't easy, she admitted, her tone turning reflective. It meant facing parts of myself I wanted to forget, confronting pain I'd buried for years. But it also showed me something I hadn't seen in a long time: hope. The people here reminded me that no matter how far you've fallen, there's always a way back. And that way starts with believing you're worth it. The audience was silent, but Bria could see the impact of her words on their faces. Tears glistening in a few eyes, small smiles of understanding. She reached for the edge of the podium, her grip firm now, no longer trembling. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, her voice clear. "But I do know this. I'm not the person I was when I walked through those doors. And for the first time in years, I believe in the person I'm becoming. If you're sitting here today wondering if it's too late for you, trust me, it's not. You're stronger than you think, and there are people who want to help you find that strength." As she stepped back from the podium, the room erupted into applause. Bria stood there for a moment, overwhelmed by the sound, by the sight of people rising to their feet. Tears stung her eyes, but this time, they weren't from pain. They were from a feeling she hadn't dared to name until now: pride. Celine was the first to reach her as she left the stage, pulling her into a warm hug. "You were incredible," she whispered. Cody was next, his grin wide and proud. "Told you they'd care," he said, his tone teasing but full of sincerity. Bria smiled, wiping her eyes. "I didn't think I could do it," she said. "But you did," Cody replied. "And you didn't just do it. You inspired every person in that room." As the evening wound down and the crowd began to disperse, Bria stood by the door, shaking hands and exchanging kind words with people who had been moved by her story. Each interaction reminded her of the power of connection, of how sharing her journey had not only lightened her burden, but had also given others hope. By the time she returned to her room at Harbor Haven, she was exhausted but lighter, a sense of accomplishment filling her chest. Sitting at her desk, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Today I found my voice, and it felt like coming home." She closed the notebook, her heart steady, her path forward clearer than ever. Bria sat at the small desk in her room, staring at the email she had just opened on her laptop. The subject line read, "Exciting opportunity, partnership with local boutique." Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked the message open. The email was from the boutique owner she had met weeks ago, the one who had encouraged her to submit her designs. It was official. They wanted to carry her collection in their shop. She read the email over and over, her heart pounding as she absorbed the words. The shop owner had mentioned how impressed she was with the pieces Bria had submitted and how the designs fit perfectly with the boutique's aesthetic. She was offering Bria a small initial order, just a few pieces, enough to get started. It was a test, but it was real, a chance to see her work on display, a chance to see it appreciated by others. Bria leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes and letting the rush of emotions wash over her. This was it. This was the breakthrough she'd been waiting for, the moment she had dared to hope for. The dream that had seemed so far out of reach just months ago was now right in front of her. But as the initial excitement began to settle, doubts crept in. Could she really pull this off? She hadn't produced anything at a professional level in years. What if her designs didn't measure up? What if the orders didn't sell? The pressure of her past failures loomed large, and for a brief moment, it felt like all of it might come crashing down. But then she thought about the people who had believed in her: Cody, who had pushed her to reconnect with her creativity; Celine, who had gently guided her through the toughest moments; and the others at Harbor Haven who had supported her when she was at her lowest. They were all rooting for her, and they believed she could do this. Bria shook her head, brushing the doubt aside. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. This was her chance to prove to herself that she was more than her past mistakes, more than the person she had been before. With newfound determination, Bria stood up and gathered her things. She needed to go to the store to see the shop owner and discuss the next steps. It wasn't just about the designs anymore. It was about taking the final step toward reclaiming her future. As she walked out of her room, Cody was waiting for her in the hallway. His eyes lit up when he saw the look on her face. "You got it, didn't you?" he asked, grinning. Bria nodded, her heart still racing. "I did. They want to carry my collection." Cody's grin widened, and he stepped forward, pulling her into a hug. "I knew you could do it," he said, his voice full of pride. "This is just the beginning, Bria. You're on your way." Bria laughed, feeling the weight of the world lift off her shoulders. "I think so," she said, her voice full of excitement and something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time, confidence. "Let's go," Cody said, motioning toward the door. "It's time to make your dream real." As they stepped outside, Bria felt a surge of excitement. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. The drive to the boutique was a blur for Bria. Her mind raced with possibilities and worries in equal measure. She could barely contain her excitement, but at the same time, her stomach twisted in knots. What if she wasn't ready? What if she made a mistake? Every step she had taken toward this moment felt like a giant leap forward. But now that she was here, the fear of failure loomed just as large. Cody, sensing her hesitation, kept the conversation light as he drove. "It's just a meeting, Bria. You've already got the designs, and they've already said yes. This is just the next step." "I know," Bria said, but she couldn't help the nervousness creeping into her voice. "It just feels like so much all at once. You've been working toward this for months. Just take a deep breath and enjoy it. You've earned this moment," Cody replied, his words grounding her. The boutique appeared ahead, its storefront a picture of charm, with its polished wood exterior and vintage signage. It looked even more inviting in person, its large windows showcasing carefully curated displays of clothes, shoes, and accessories. Bria's breath caught in her chest as they parked across the street. "Ready?" Cody asked, turning to her. Bria nodded, her fingers gripping the door handle. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, but now that it was here, it felt real, almost too real. As they walked into the boutique, the bell above the door chimed softly, and the owner, whose name was Margaret, looked up from the counter with a warm smile. "Bria, it's so good to see you again," she said, stepping forward to greet her. Bria smiled back, though it was a little shaky. "Hi, Margaret. Thank you so much for everything." "You're welcome, dear," Margaret replied. "I'm glad we could make this work. I'm excited to see your pieces in person." Bria glanced down at the bag she was holding. Inside were the completed sketches she had meticulously turned into real pieces of clothing, dresses, blouses, and skirts, each one reflecting the best of what she had once designed and the new direction she was headed. She felt a rush of pride mixed with a pinch of anxiety as she handed the bag over. Margaret carefully pulled out the first piece, a sleek, midnight blue dress with a draped neckline and subtle pleats that gave it a graceful, almost ethereal look. She held it up, turning it this way and that, inspecting the stitching, the fit, the flow of the fabric. Bria held her breath, waiting for Margaret's response. "This is stunning," Margaret said after a moment, her voice full of admiration. "You've really captured something special here. I knew from your sketches that you had talent, but seeing it in person..." She shook her head in amazement. "Bria, you've outdone yourself." Bria felt her heart soar, a wave of relief washing over her. "You really think so?" Margaret smiled warmly. "Absolutely. This is the kind of design that will sell itself. We'll start with a small batch, see how it goes, and then we can grow from there." Bria nodded, feeling her confidence grow with every word. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little stronger now. "This means more than you know." Margaret smiled and placed the dress on a nearby rack. "This is just the beginning, Bria. We're going to make your name known here." As Bria watched Margaret carefully review the remaining pieces, her mind finally quieted. The fear she had been carrying for so long was starting to fade, replaced by the realization that this was her new reality. She wasn't just a survivor of her past anymore. She was building something new, something all her own, with a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. Bria realized that the woman she was becoming was more than capable of handling whatever came next. This was her second chance, and she was ready to embrace it. When the meeting concluded and Bria and Cody left the boutique, it was with a renewed sense of purpose. As they walked back to the car, Cody turned to her, his grin wide. "Told you you'd nail it." Bria laughed, the sound of it light and free. "You were right," she said, glancing back at the boutique. "This is just the beginning." And as they drove away, Bria knew that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't just dreaming anymore. She was living her dream. The soft hum of the sewing machine was the only sound in the room as Bria worked late into the evening. She had always loved the rhythm of it, the steady back and forth of the needles stitching fabric together, creating something beautiful out of raw material. The past few weeks had been a blur of activity, meetings with Margaret, creating new designs, adjusting patterns, and working with fabric she hadn't touched in years. It felt like she was finally finding her rhythm again. But tonight, as she ran her fingers over the fabric of a new dress she was finishing, a wave of uncertainty hit her. The boutique had placed its first order. The designs had been well received, and for the first time in a long time, she had the opportunity to show her work to the world. But what if it wasn't enough? What if no one liked it? What if the dream she'd worked so hard for came crashing down? She set the dress aside, reaching for the notebook Cody had given her months ago. She hadn't written in it for a while, but tonight it felt like the right moment. As she flipped it open, she saw the words she'd written before, the ones that had started her journey. "I don't know who I am anymore, but maybe I want to find out." Bria smiled softly at the words, remembering how far she had come. But tonight, those words seemed like a lifetime ago. Now she knew who she was. She was someone who had survived loss and failure, someone who had started over and dared to dream again. The past was no longer a weight on her shoulders. It was a foundation, and she was building something new on top of it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She hadn't expected anyone, but when she opened it, she found Celine standing in the hallway, holding a bag of takeout and a wide grin. "I thought you could use a break," Celine said, stepping inside. "You've been working nonstop, and we both know you can't live on coffee alone." Bria smiled, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease at the sight of her friend. "You're right. I haven't had a real meal in days." Celine set the bag on the small kitchen counter, and Bria sat down at the table. They ate together in comfortable silence, and for the first time that evening, Bria felt her anxiety begin to fade. The work was hard, but it was rewarding. The fear of failure was still there, but it was quieter now, drowned out by the sense that she was doing what she was meant to do. "So," Celine said between bites, glancing at Bria with a teasing smile, "how are we feeling about the first batch of designs?" Bria hesitated, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edge of her napkin. "I don't know. I'm excited, but also terrified. What if it's not enough? What if no one buys them?" Celine put her fork down and looked at her seriously. "Bria, listen to me. You've already proven something incredible. You've come this far. The fact that you're here, about to showcase your designs, means you've already succeeded. The rest is just details." Bria looked at her, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I don't think I would have gotten here without you," she said quietly. "You've been there for me every step of the way." Celine smiled warmly. "And I'll keep being here. But remember, you don't need anyone to tell you that you're good enough. You already know that. You've got the talent, the passion, and the drive. That's all you need." Bria nodded slowly, absorbing Celine's words. She was right. She had come this far on her own. Strength and the fear would never go away completely, but she could face it now. She could trust herself. After they finished their meal, Celine helped Bria clean up before giving her a hug. "You've got this. Don't forget that." Bria watched as Celine left, her heart lighter than it had been in days. She glanced at the sketchbook on the counter, filled with pages of new ideas. There was still much to do, more designs to create, more work to be done. But for the first time, Bria felt ready to tackle it all. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And with that, she opened her sketchbook again, her pencil poised over the page. There was no turning back now. The next few days flew by in a blur of activity. Bria was up early each morning, sketching, cutting fabric, and sewing well into the night. She had made the decision to push past her doubts and give this new chapter her all. The boutique's order was only the beginning. There was so much more to do if she was going to build the life she had dreamed of, the life she was starting to believe in again. Celine's words echoed in her mind, especially the reminder to trust herself. Bria had found that the more she listened to her inner voice, the more confident she became. The work was hard, but with each piece she created, she felt the creative energy flowing back through her veins. Each stitch was a declaration that she wasn't the same woman she had been when she first arrived at Harbor Haven. She was someone new, someone stronger. On the day the first batch of her designs was delivered to the boutique, Bria couldn't sit still. She had packed each piece with care, wrapping them in tissue paper and placing them in boxes, just like the professionals did. But now that the moment had arrived, her nerves were taking over. Cody found her pacing in her room, her hands wringing the fabric of her shirt. "Everything okay?" he asked, leaning in the doorway. "I can't believe it's happening," Bria said, her voice tight. "What if the designs don't do well? What if people don't like them?" Cody stepped into the room, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Bria, you've already done something amazing. You've created something beautiful. The rest is out of your control. All you can do is put it out there and see where it goes. And I have no doubt it will be a success." She nodded, trying to calm the storm inside her. "You're right. It's just hard to let go, you know. After everything I've been through, I want so badly for this to work." Cody smiled, his expression soft but filled with warmth. "I get it, but you're doing it. You're making it happen, and that's what matters." With a deep breath, Bria stepped forward, ready to take on the next chapter of her journey. Bria nodded again. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was willing to trust it. She had taken the leap, and now it was time to wait and see. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Orders started trickling in, and Bria received positive feedback from Margaret. Customers loved the designs, and the pieces were selling out faster than they had expected. Margaret asked if Bria could start creating a second batch. Bria's heart soared with every email and compliment. She was doing it. She was building something real. But even as success began to settle in, a small voice inside her whispered that this was just the beginning. There was so much more she wanted to accomplish, so many dreams she hadn't even dared to dream yet. One evening, after sending out a new set of designs, Bria found herself sitting at the table in her room, gazing out the window. The sun had just set, casting a soft orange glow across the sky. The shop had been doing well, her confidence had grown, and she felt more at peace than she had in years. Yet something was still missing. She needed more than just designs and sales. She needed to reconnect with her roots, with the woman she had been before everything fell apart. Bria grabbed the notebook she had written months ago, the one where she had first dared to say, "Maybe I want to find out who I am." She flipped it open to the page where her dreams had started to take shape, where her past self had written down what felt impossible. But now, as she read through the words, she realized they were no longer impossible. Her hand hovered over the page. It was time to dream bigger. And for the first time, Bria smiled, a sense of clarity enveloping her. She wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was expanding it, creating a future she had once thought out of reach. There was so much more she could do, and she was ready to pursue it with everything she had. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but Bria had learned to trust herself, and that was the greatest gift she could give herself. She put the pen to the page, writing the words that had eluded her for so long. This is just the beginning. With that, she closed the notebook, knowing with certainty that the path forward was hers to create. Bria stood in front of the boutique's large windows, watching the bustle of the city streets. The sunlight filtered through the glass, casting soft rays over the rows of clothing hanging on display. The pieces she had worked so hard on were finally out there on the racks, ready to be worn by someone else. The reality of it was still settling in. It felt surreal, but it also felt like the culmination of a dream she had almost given up on. She turned toward the back of the store, where Margaret was busy with a few last-minute details for the upcoming event. The boutique was hosting its first ever showcase for local designers, and Bria's pieces were at the center of it. She had been invited to present her collection to a room full of potential buyers, press, and fashion enthusiasts. Her heart raced at the thought of standing before so many people, but this time, the fear that had once paralyzed her was different. It wasn't the paralyzing fear of failure. It was a nervous energy, a healthy sense of anticipation for what was to come. Bria was no longer the woman who hid from the spotlight. She was the woman who had worked for this moment, fought for it, and now she was ready to step into it. Margaret came over with a smile, handing her a small bouquet of flowers. "Here you go," she said. "For good luck. I think today is going to be a great success." Bria took the flowers, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said, smiling back at Margaret. "I never thought I'd get here. I didn't think I'd be ready for this." "You were ready the moment you decided to take the first step," Margaret said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. "You just didn't know it yet." Bria felt a surge of gratitude, but before she could respond, the door to the boutique opened, and a group of guests began to filter in. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned to face them. She wasn't sure why she was surprised. They had been invited to come after all, but the weight of it all still hit her like a wave. Celine was one of the first to arrive, a wide smile on her face as she walked toward Bria. "There she is," she said, pulling Bria into a hug. "I knew you could do it." Bria pulled back slightly, looking at her friend with tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Celine smiled warmly. "You would have done the same thing. You just needed someone to remind you of your strength. You've got it in you, Bria. You always have." Before Bria could reply, a few of the boutique staff members began leading the guests to the designated area for the fashion showcase. Bria's heart beat faster, but the steady rhythm of it was different now. There was a sense of purpose behind it. She wasn't just there by chance. She had earned her place. As the guests began to take their seats, Bria stepped to the back of the room, ready to watch her collection come to life in front of her. Her models, whom she had worked with closely, were preparing backstage. Each piece of clothing represented a part of her journey, each stitch a reminder of how far she had come. They weren't just designs to her anymore. They were symbols of her resilience, her growth, and her unshakable belief in herself. The music started, and one by one, the models stepped onto the stage, showcasing Bria's work in a way she had only dreamed of. The audience applauded, some of them whispering to each other, clearly impressed by what they saw. Bria stood quietly in the back, her heart swelling with pride. The designs were beautiful, but more than that, they were hers. When the final model came off the stage, the applause grew louder, and Bria felt a wave of emotion she couldn't contain. She was overwhelmed, but not with fear or doubt. This time, the feeling was gratitude. Gratitude for the journey that had brought her here and for the people who had stood by her. "Bria," Margaret called from the front of the room, motioning for her to come forward. "It's time." Bria took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and stepped into the spotlight. The room fell into a hushed silence as everyone turned to look at her. "This is it," Bria thought to herself. "This is my moment." She walked toward the front of the room, her feet light and her chest open. When she reached the stage, she looked out at the crowd. Her heart was still pounding, but it was no longer with fear. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady as she addressed the room. "Thank you all for being here today. This collection is a reflection of who I am now, not who I was. It's a reminder that we can start over, that we can create something beautiful out of the pieces we thought were broken. This is only the beginning for me, and I hope you'll be a part of this journey as it unfolds." The applause that followed was louder than anything Bria had ever heard. It was more than appreciation for her designs. It was recognition of the woman she had become. As she stood there, taking it all in, she knew without a doubt that this was just the start of a new chapter, and she was ready for it. The applause slowly faded, but the warmth of the moment lingered in the air. Bria stood on the stage, her heart still racing, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was a sense of triumph, of belonging, of finally stepping into the life she had fought so hard to create. She had made it. She had taken the leap, and now there was no turning back. As she stepped down from the stage, the faces in the crowd blurred into a sea of admiration and excitement. She was surrounded by well-wishers, press, buyers, and supporters, all eager to talk to her, congratulate her, and express their amazement at the collection. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. Bria was no longer the woman hiding in the shadows of her past. She was the woman everyone was looking at, and it felt good. Margaret found her amid the crowd, her face beaming with pride. "You did it, Bria. I knew you had it in you," she said, pulling her into a hug. Bria laughed, her chest full. "I can't believe this is happening." "It's happening," Margaret replied, her voice firm. "And it's just the beginning. There's so much more to come." Celine joined them, her expression full of pride as she squeezed Bria's shoulder. "This is only the first step, but it's a huge one. You've made something real. I'm so proud of you." "Thank you," Bria said, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you, both of you." Margaret smiled and waved a hand, as if brushing the sentiment aside. "You did the hard part. We were just here to support you." Bria felt her heart swell with gratitude. She had walked this path alone for a long time, carrying the weight of her past, but now she realized she wasn't alone anymore. She had people who believed in her, people who had helped her get back to herself, who had reminded her that she was worth fighting for. As the evening wore on, Bria spoke to more people, buyers, potential collaborators, and even a few journalists. She felt a sense of pride she hadn't experienced in years. But even more, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. The struggles, the setbacks, and the pain. It all led her to this moment. Later that night, after the event had wrapped up, Bria found herself sitting quietly on the small balcony of her apartment at Harbor Haven. The city was peaceful below, the lights twinkling softly against the backdrop of the night sky. She had come a long way from the woman who had first stepped into this place, lost and unsure of herself. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts, and she turned to find Cody standing in the doorway, a wide grin on his face. He held a bottle of champagne in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. "You did it," he said, his voice full of pride. "You really did it." Bria smiled, the weight of the day catching up with her. "I couldn't have done it without you." He walked in, setting the champagne down on the table and pouring them each a glass. "You found your way. I just helped you remember the path." They clinked their glasses together, the sound of it clear in the stillness of the room. "To new beginnings," Cody said, his grin infectious. "To new beginnings," Bria echoed, her voice full of conviction. As she sat there, the soft hum of the city around her, Bria realized something. She had found her way. She had built this life with her own 2 hands, from the pieces of herself that she thought were lost forever. And now, she was ready to continue building. She had found the strength to keep moving forward. Her journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, she knew exactly where she was headed. With that certainty came peace. Bria was no longer running from her past. She was walking proudly toward her future. This time, she knew she was enough. The road ahead might still have its challenges, but Bria was ready. Ready to create, ready to grow, and above all, ready to live the life she had always deserved. She looked out over the city once more, a quiet smile on her face. For the first time in years, she truly felt like she was home. And this was just the beginning. Did this story touch your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale of 0 to 10, how powerful was this tale? Smash that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a story that stirs your soul. For more heart-racing, emotional tales, tap the end screen now.